本师释迦牟尼佛。
南无本师释迦牟尼佛。
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 南无阿弥陀佛。
南无阿弥陀佛。
Namo tassa, I will use the Pali. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so today we welcome you to Zhuangyan Monastery for the celebration of Vesak. Vesak is the day in the lunar calendar that celebrates the birth, the enlightenment, and the passing into nirvana of our supreme teacher, the Buddha, the fully enlightened one. I know in the Chinese tradition, Vesak celebrates just the birth of the Buddha, but in the southern tradition, Vesak commemorates those three events in the life of the Buddha, which according to tradition all happened on the full moon day in the month of May. So we begin with the birth of the Buddha, but according to the Buddhist tradition, the process by which the Buddha attained enlightenment began many, many cosmic aeons ago in the past. According to the Buddhist tradition, the universe goes through many cycles of expansion and contraction. Just as when we breathe, the lungs expand and contract, the heart beats, it expands and contracts, so the cosmos, the universe, goes through stages of expansion and contraction through beginningless time. And according to the Buddhist texts, many, many, many cosmic aeons ago, long in the past, a Buddha arose in the world by the name of Dipankara. At that time, the person who was to become our Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, was an ascetic living in the mountains. And when he heard that the Buddha Dipankara arose in the world, he came to meet him, and he bowed down in the mud at the feet of the Buddha, and he made the vow, the determination, in the future, let me become a Buddha, a supreme teacher for the world. From that point on, in life after life, thousands and thousands of lives, he practiced developing certain qualities that we call paramitas, bolomi. So he practiced generosity, giving his own blood, his vital organs, even his life. He observed ethical discipline, moral discipline. He practiced patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom, the 6 bolomi or paramitas. And when all of those paramitas were fulfilled, finally he was able to take birth into this world and attain supreme enlightenment himself. And so he took birth in India sometime maybe in the 5th century BC, and he reached maturity. He was brought up as an aristocrat, a prince, and shielded from the sufferings of life. But when he reached the age of maturity, he began to reflect upon the sufferings of life, upon the realities of old age, sickness, and death. And then he made the decision to renounce the worldly life and become an ascetic, seeking a solution, an answer to the problem of suffering, the problem of birth, old age, and death. And so for 6 years, he undertook various ascetic practices, different types of meditation, all without success, until one day, after 6 years of striving, sitting beneath a tree alongside the Narendra River, he attained the supreme enlightenment, tearing away the obscurations of ignorance, eradicating greed, hatred, and delusion, removing all obstructions to the knowledge of the nature of dharmas, the nature of phenomena. And with this, he became the supremely enlightened Buddha. And according to our tradition, that event took place on one evening, one night, on the full moon night in the month of May. After attaining enlightenment, now called the Buddha, now the enlightened one, had to make the decision, should I try to convey the truth I have realized to others? And first, his mind inclined to remaining silent, to just continuing to live peacefully in the forest, passing his life in quiet meditation, without taking on the turmoil, the struggle of trying to convey the truth to others. But then as he reflected upon living beings, sentient beings, human beings like ourselves, living, immersed in suffering, afflicted with old age, sickness, and death, afflicted by the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion, then his heart was moved by great compassion. And he made that decision to go forth and to begin teaching the Dharma, the truth that he had realized. And so from his seat of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya, he walked to the deer park near the city of Benares and began his career of teaching 5 ascetics who had served him during his period of striving for enlightenment. And so he began by teaching the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And from then on, for the next 45 years, the Buddha wandered through the towns and cities and villages of northern India, teaching countless people the way to liberation from suffering. And he established a special importance. He established the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns, to learn his teaching, to practice his teaching diligently, to achieve the goal of enlightenment for themselves, and to transmit the teaching to everyone that they encountered, passing on the teaching from generation to generation until the teaching has come down to us today. And so the Buddha became the enlightened one. His teaching we call the Dharma, and the community of renunciants who learn the Dhamma and convey the Dhamma to others becomes the Sangha, the 3 jewels of Buddhism: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. After 45 years of teaching, at the age of 80, the Buddha realized that his time in this world was coming to an end, and so he headed northwards to the city of Kusinara, and there he lay down between a pair of trees, and as he lay down, thousands of people came to pay their final respects to him. And then on the full moon night in the month of May, in his 80th year, the Buddha passed into the final state of liberation, the state of final nirvana. And so on this Vesak day, we commemorate these three major events in the life of the Buddha. His birth into this world on the full moon month of May early in the 5th century, then his attainment of supreme enlightenment at the age of 35, and then his passing into nirvana at the age of 80. And so today we're going to perform the ceremony of bathing the Buddha. So we imagine that these statues, these images represent the newly born Buddha, born into this world. And we're going to use this fragrant water and pour it over the image of the Buddha as a way of washing the body of the newborn baby Buddha. But when we wash the image of the Buddha, symbolically, this represents washing our own minds and hearts of the stains of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so when we wash the image of the Buddha, this is a reminder of our own job, our own task as followers of the Buddha, as disciples of the Buddha. We don't just perform an empty ceremony, an empty ritual, but we see that our task is to wipe away the stains of our own mind, to purify our own minds. The Buddha teaches that the reason why we encounter suffering, the reason why we migrate from life to life through this beginningless cycle of samsara, of birth and death, is because the mind is defiled. It is defiled by the stains of greed, hatred, and delusion. The defilements arise within our own minds, and they spread out and envelop the world. So we see the whole world struggling under the weight of greed and violence and hatred and anger, misery and suffering. And so our task as followers of the Buddha is to benefit the world and to benefit ourselves. The way we benefit ourselves is by wearing away, removing the greed, hatred, and delusion in our own minds. And the way we benefit the world is by acting to promote the well-being of the world through acts of generosity, through acts of creating peace, and through spreading the teachings that lead to wisdom. So on this Vesak day, as we bathe the image of the Buddha, let us remind ourselves that our own task as followers of the Buddha is to purify our own minds, to enlighten our own minds, and to become true disciples of the Buddha, shining brightly in this world of darkness. Okay, so thank you for listening. And 今天没有人翻译我的说法，所以我要用英文。对不起。
OK， 我大概讲一下重点哈。今天是浴佛节，在北传的国家啊，在农历的4月8号是佛陀降生的时候，是浴佛节。那在那个南传的，就是在5月的月圆日，就是现在是5月份嘛，对不对？然后5月的月圆日是在下个礼拜3，好。那我们今天用浴佛法会。那南传国家是3节同一庆，就是佛陀的降生、成道，还有涅槃，都在，就是说阳历西元，好，比如说今年2024年的5月的月圆日，5月份不一定哪一天，就是农历的15，5月份农历的15。这样大家清楚吗？好，就是国历的5月份的，比如说这是下个礼拜，哈，就这样子，好。那我们 释迦牟尼佛真的要我们替他洗浴吗？那其实这是借着外在的佛来洗涤我们内在的佛。当我们的身体脏了，还有衣服脏了，好，那我们可以用水来洗。可是当我们的内心具足了贪嗔痴，那用水就洗不干净了。所以要用法水来洗涤我们的这个身心。好，那我们待会呢，怎么样浴佛？好，我们浴佛的时候，我们手拿个香汤，以至诚恭敬的心来沐浴太子像。好，那祈愿以佛陀的智慧法水，外涤尘染，就是洗涤外面的这些污垢，内除心垢，洗除我们里面的这个内心的一些污垢。好，回向一切众生，除热恼，得清凉，永出苦轮。好，就是脱离这个轮回。好，然后我们再发个无上的菩提心，同证如来净法身。好，当你在浴佛的时候，你心量扩大的话呢，你的这个所得到的也会大，不会祈求我家里平安，我身体健康，怎么样？这个心量太小了哈。所以呢，我们要回向一切众生除热恼，得清凉，永出苦轮。哈，然后发个无上菩提心，希望一切的众生都能够同证如来净法身，跟佛一样。这样大家懂吗？好，谢谢，请起立。